This is an Undiscovered Legacy production and proud member of PodNation Media Network.
Hello, Skooblievers, and welcome to episode number 109 of the Undiscovered Entrepreneur. And it's me, Skoob, coming at you on whatever device you happen to be listening on. I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've been working on for you, my Skooblievers out there, to help you get across the start line. Over the next couple of months, I will be working on a course for you. I have the first section of the course already put together. I'm probably going to be doing a total of 7 sections. And this is all basics for you to get started, to get yourself across the start line. We're going to talk about the 4 hurdles to stop. We're going to talk about how to find your zone of genius in this course. So keep an eye out for progress reports on that. You'll probably see those in my socials. And every once in a while, I will kind of throw a little thing in here for you to let you know how things are going. Now, a little bit of background on my guest. This guest is a part of Podpage. Now, Podpage is a website maker. This is what I actually use for my podcast. If you look at my website, tuepodcast.net, that's Podpage happening there. Now, while I was at Podfest, I ran into our guest, who is Dave. Dave was there. We shook hands with each other. I actually helped him a little bit too. I guess everybody wanted to check out Podpage, so there was a couple people. I was there actually to help him answer some questions because I use Podpage, so why not? And then probably about a month or so later, I accidentally ran into Dave again on Reddit. So, I mean, if I'm going to run into this guy 2 or 3 times, of course I'm going to have him on my podcast. So today's guest is Dave. Dave Jackson founded the School of Podcasting in 2005, offering courses, unlimited coaching, and a community for podcasters, and was included in the Podcast Hall of Fame in 2018. Dave's success stems from building relationships through his podcast, leading to opportunities like speaking at Social Media Marketing World, community building, and his focus on helping others. So let's listen to Dave. Salutations, Skooblievers, and we are here again with another amazing entrepreneur. Today we are here with Dave. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
Scoobs, I'm doing well.
All right.
Ready to have some fun.
Oh, we're always ready to have some fun around here. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to be on the Undiscovered Entrepreneur, get across the start line.
Yeah, happy to be here.
All right. So before we get started here, I have one kind of semi-serious question to ask you. You ready?
I'm ready, my friend.
Okay, here we go. Are you a Skoobeliever?
Of course, I'm a Skoobeliever. How can you not be a Skoobeliever? Everyone's a Skoobeliever.
I certainly hope so. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for being a Skoobeliever. I super appreciate you. That's awesome. Okay, so Dave, real quick here, we're just going to get a little bit about who you are, what your entrepreneur adventure is, and how you got across the start line in your entrepreneur adventure.
Excellent. Yeah, I started back. I mean, the problem is I've been doing this forever. So we'll start with podcasting, but before then I was building websites. But I started podcasting back in 2005, launched the School of Podcasting, which has grown my network and all sorts of other fun things along the way, and got me a book deal. In 2018, I was inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame. And recently I was hired at Podpage, where I'm now the head of podcasting.
Awesome. And I use Podpage, y'all, and it's been amazing. If you don't know what Podpage is and you're a podcaster, you got to check it out. It's so simple, so easy. It's very inexpensive, and there's a lot of great things to harness what you're doing into one spot. We could talk about that a little bit later. So tell me how you actually started your first business. I guess your first business was the podcast, right?
Yeah, I'm going to back up just a little bit. My first thing that I tried to sell online, now again, this is Stone Age times, and I was one of the first people to do computer-based learning. They were on CDs and DVDs and things like that. And so I was getting out of college and I want to get a job. So I made this little tutorial that said, here's Dave Jackson, here's his credentials, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, you got to take a quiz. And the one question was, your next step should be A, call and schedule an interview with Dave Jackson, or B, call and schedule an interview, C, call and schedule an interview. So it was cute and it worked. And everybody's, wow, you should sell those. And so I went, and red flag number one, digital resume, which is what I called it, .com was already taken. And yet I decided not to look at it. So red flag number two, and long story short, I put it out, built this website in Microsoft Front Page, which tells you how long ago it was. And I was like, okay, now I'm ready for the world to find it and I will make my millions. And that's where you want to maybe look at your competition and see what they're up to and see what the current rate is. And I found out that, wow, there are people doing much more robust things at a much better price. And I was like, okay, that was a fun lesson. Took a couple of weeks to throw that together. So that was the first one. The School of Podcasting was one where I had seen other things come and go. And like at the time, again, dating myself, MySpace was ginormous, right? And it's kind of like TikTok now. And I totally missed the MySpace boat. And this guy came up. He was a friend of mine. He'd just been to this big marketing conference. And he said, hey, I just saw the next big thing. And I go, what is it? And he goes, podcasting. And I typed podcasting into Google and 1.5 pages came up. And I went, wait, how do you spell this? And it's POD casting. And I'm like, I think we broke the internet. There's nothing on it. And so at the time they were saying that membership sites and podcasting were going to be the next big thing. And I just seen so many things where you're like, oh, I should have done that. Oh, I should have. And I just thought, you know what? I'm tired of sitting here watching these ideas that I could have easily just hopped on board and probably been pretty good at go by. And I'm like, I'm not sitting on the sidelines this time. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to figure this out. I've got the internet and Google is my teacher. Let's see what we can do. So that's really how I got into the School of Podcasting. And it was, I mean, so many lessons there. We could go on for an hour, but when I first opened the doors, originally it was $2 because I thought if I could get 500 people to give me $2, that would be 1,000, all these great things. And then eventually I raised it up to 5 because I thought, well, that's too much. And this is where we just undervalue what we're delivering. And so finally you need really good friends that will tell you the truth. And so he called me up. He's like, hey, I saw your website. I'm like, yeah. He goes, I got a question for you. And I go, what's that? He goes, can you tell me of anything that has value on the internet for $5? And I go, no. And he goes, exactly. And you have a perception problem. So this can't be any good for $5. And it was funny because I raised it to 20. And at 20, I had way more people sign up. But my business plan was, I know I'm going to have these people sign up. And then people will go, oh, that's cool. I want a podcast. How'd you learn how to podcast? And they'll say, oh, go see Dave at the School of Podcasting. But at $20, I had people sign up. I'd gotten over that perception problem. But these people didn't have enough skin in the game to actually make a podcast. I had a few, but I had a lot of people that were giving me $20 for absolutely nothing. I'm like, can I help? What's going on? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm getting around to it. So I eventually raised my price to $50. And that's when people actually started making podcasts. And that was just some of the early days in terms of lessons of we just go out and look at what other people are doing. And in my case, most entrepreneurs were helping people do something. And that's what either you're going to save them time or money or headache, something like that. You're solving a problem. And that's why we underprice ourselves is we know how to overcome the problem. So now the problem doesn't seem that big. And so consequently, we're like, I'm not going to charge that much. It's not that big a deal. It's not that big a deal to you because you know how to get through the weeds and everything else. And so that's where I had to really realize, I'm like, wait, I need to raise my price here.
It's amazing to me, and I've talked about this many, many times in my podcast, how we undervalue what we actually have to offer people because we don't feel either it's like that big a deal, like you said before,
Right.
or even are we even worthy enough to be charging something more than we think that we're charging for our product and what we're doing. But we got to realize that people judge our product firsthand by how much it actually is. It's if you go to Walmart and you buy a pair of jeans, yeah, it was $15, but I mean, how good is it? Or you go to the Gap and you get a $50 pair of jeans, but you know that for $50, they're going to last you years. They're going to last you a really long time. The same idea when you're having a product put out there. make sure that you're pricing the product to where it feels like it's going to be a good solid product, because if you charge less than that, nobody's going to take it seriously. And like you said, you don't put a whole lot of skin into the game, you're not going to really accomplish a whole lot. That's something I'm learning as we're speaking right now too, because I'm trying to put stuff out there too, and I'm going like, come on, but it's just not working out, and I'm realizing I'm not charging enough, and it just doesn't seem right. So I'm playing with that a little bit too. I understand that. When you were starting earlier, you said before you actually got into the podcasting, there was few ideas that you actually had that you weren't actually doing. Was there something holding you back from doing those? Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, like when I was a teenager, I was really good at playing the guitar. Like everybody's like, you need to move to California, because I was just, here's this 16-year-old kid playing Eddie Van Halen. And they're like, wait, what? That's a little quiet shy Dave Jackson. And I'm just shredding my face off. And everybody's like, you really should move to California. And I thought about it. I really did. I got out of high school and I'm like, because back then I was, hey, I'm a rocker. I'm going to do it. If it's too loud, you're too old. And I thought about it and just everything. I had a cousin that played like bars, and, you know, she was really, really good. And it's a hard life. You don't make a lot of money, and it takes a lot of luck and blah, blah, blah. And I just thought, I don't know anybody in California. And so I didn't go. And it was one of those things where I would hear whatever came on the radio and I could just pick up a guitar and play it. And they're like, why aren't you on the record? And I was like, so that was one. Just any kind. I remember I think I still have the domain, First Time Visitor, because I was really into video in the very early days of Camtasia 1, version 1. And I had this idea, and I was like, I should offer a service where I will go to your website and just think out loud while I surf. And actually, I think at one point I almost built a website for it. And then another company basically did the same thing. And it's those things where you go, oh, somebody else is already doing it. There's only one person allowed to do this. That was a really dumb one. If you think about it, every night something happens in the world, and at least 6 stations talk about it that are in all news channels. It's not like ABC said, oh, NBC is already doing the news at 11. I guess we can't do it. So that was one that I was like, that was dumb. I should have just did it anyway and come up with some sort of something that would set you apart from your competition. So that was another one. And I'd either put my toe in and didn't really give it the old college try, or anything like that, where I just talked myself out of it. We all have imposter syndrome. That's something that I've learned. There's a great documentary on Netflix about Garth Brooks, and he talks about he got to play Central Park in New York and was convinced nobody in the big city was going to listen to this country boy. And there's a scene where he literally had pulled all the drape shut and was just secluded in his hotel. And his wife finally said, I got to go see. And he said, don't tell me. I don't want to know. And so finally his tour manager came in and said, Garth, they had to move the barricades. And he's like, there ain't nobody here, is there? And he's like, no, Garth, there's 850,000 people out there. And he's, what? You're telling me there's 850,000 people out there? And he goes, no, Garth, I'm telling you, there are 850,000 people there 20 minutes ago. He goes, they're moving the barricades because there's more people coming in. And I was like, man, and he'd already got, at the time, Giuliani was mayor of New York. So they gave him like some triple platinum, key to the city, best male vocalist. All these accolades are coming at him, and he's secluded in a room convincing himself that nobody's going to show up. Meanwhile, by the time the concert actually happened, he had close to 1 million people. And the whole time he was convinced nobody was going to show up. So that's when I was like, okay, this is normal. And I remember when I first started, my first podcast was for musicians. And at the time, the godfather of music marketing was this guy named Bob Baker. In fact, his book is actually in the movie Rock School with Jack Black. So he was like a big deal. And I was like, who am I to even think about competing with Bob Baker? I mean, but Bob didn't have a podcast yet. So I started the podcast, and one of my first guests was, you guessed it, Bob Baker. Why not? And I was amazed he'd even come on my show. And I asked him once, I said, how did you, because he had this huge newsletter and everybody knew who he was. And he said, I knew how to write, and I'd played in some bands myself. And I just thought, I know a little more than other people, so I'll go ahead and write about it. And so that's the thing. I think we all think we have to be this guru that knows all. And you just need to know more than your audience if you want to help them. And that's one of my backgrounds is teaching. I did a lot of Microsoft Office back in the day, and I would always get nervous about teaching Microsoft Access, which is this database program. I knew Word and Excel and PowerPoint like the back of my hand, but that one I did not. And my boss one day just said, remember, you just got to know more than your students, and you already do. So don't worry about it.
If you're just a little bit ahead of somebody else, they could learn something from you. And always keep that in mind too, as you're making products or whatever it is. Like me, I have been doing podcasting for 3 years. And I'm thinking like, I mean, podcasting's out. Everybody knows podcasting, but that's not entirely true. There's people that do ask me, hey, how do you do this? How do you talk to guests? How do you get people to come onto your program? Things like that. I'm still getting these questions. So it's don't kind of like psych yourself out when it comes to wanting to know if people know things already. More times than not, they don't. And it actually surprises me sometimes too, how much people, I'm like, isn't that common knowledge? No, it's not. Not as much as you think it is.
I was the baby of the family, so I grew up with my older brothers and sisters' music. So I was the only kid who knew who Jimi Hendrix was in first grade, and I'd been raised on the Beatles. And so I remember once I was out to dinner with someone, and I said, "Oh man, what a total Pete Best!" And she said, "Who's Pete Best?" And I go, "You don't know who Pete Best is?" And she's, "I've never heard that name before in my life." I'm like, "Come on, seriously?" And she's, "No." I go, "It was the original drummer of the Beatles." I go, "And then Ringo replaced him." And she goes, "How do you know this stuff?" I go, "Everybody knows this." She's, "No, you're a music nerd, all this stuff." So again, we think it's common knowledge, and it's really not that common.
I just had a flashback of my childhood at a time where we're going to get into stories, y'all, just real quick. Okay. So I'm driving along. My dad's driving. This is when I was a little kid. And I was a huge Dark Crystal fan. So I'm a Dark Crystal. I'm a Jim Henson nerd. What can I say? And my dad couldn't remember the name of one of the characters. And I go, "That's Olgra." And he goes, "How do you know that?" I said, "Of course, it's Olgra." I mean, he goes, "If you could figure out math as much as you can remember the characters of the Dark Crystal, then you're going to be just fine."
Yeah, absolutely.
I still am very bad at math, but I still remember the characters of the Dark Crystal. But it's that kind of thinking where it's really not as much common knowledge as you think.
Right.
I want to take a step back just for a second here. A little question about Bob Baker, since you brought him up.
Yeah.
What was it like to ask him to be on your podcast? Because he's such a big name and you're just getting started. I had that same problem too, where I wanted to get people like Pat Flynn and JLD and some bigger names onto my podcast, but I'm kind of like, am I big enough? Am I bold enough? Is my podcast big enough? Tell me about that experience that you had with Bob Baker and asking him to be on your podcast.
Yeah, I think it started with he had put out a newsletter and I replied to it. It was like, "Hey, I really like this article about so-and-so." And he was like, "Hey, thanks so much." And I did that a couple of times, not really with like premeditation. I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to do this 3 times and then ask him to be on the show." I just started to feel like I knew him because it's one of those things where when you consume someone's content, you just feel like you know them. And so I was like, the worst thing he could say is no. You know, he's got a lot of info. And I just was like, "Hey, I've got this podcast." I think he actually had listened to it. That was the thing that blew me away. He was like, "Hey, I heard your episode on such and such." And I was like, "Wow, Bob Baker listens to my show." I think that's really probably the big thing that pushed it over. Because you got to remember, in 2005, there were like 50 podcasts. And so if you were looking for music marketing, there was like me, and that was it. So I just asked him, and I was amazed that he said yes. And then I was like, that's when it dawned on me. I'm like, wait, people normally wouldn't give me the time of day, but because I had a podcast, they would. And I interviewed the drummer of Ozzy Osbourne and the bass player from Quiet Riot and all these other people. And I also found out that if you want someone to come on your show, wait till they're selling something. So like the drummer from Ozzy, his name is Carmine Appice. He's played with everybody and Rod Stewart and all these things, but he just online built this like drum school. And I'd seen about it because I ran in those circles, and it was like, "Oh, Carmine has this new thing." And I was like, "Oh, I wonder if he wanted to come on the show," which was great because he came on and completely trashed Sharon Osbourne and what a jerk she was and all sorts of great stories. But I was like, and at the time, there's a really big name in blues now. His name is Joe Bonamassa. And I discovered him before he was even like Joe Bonamassa. He was playing in another band. And sometimes you got to start with what you got. And so I actually ended up, because this is back in the days, you got to remember that we had Skype, maybe. And so I remember I went to Radio Shack because he was on the road or didn't have Skype or something. But I went to Radio Shack, which doesn't exist, and bought this suction cup that you stuck on your actual, not a phone like a smartphone, but an actual phone. And then I plugged that into a cassette, which later I then digitized. But it sounded horrendous. I listen to it now and just cringe. But you got to start with what you got, with where you're at, and move up from there. But that was a lesson I learned, that I was like, wow, I can't believe these people are talking to me. But because I have a podcast, they're trying to reach the people. Like in this case, I had a bunch of musicians. So Carmine's, oh, good, drummers are there. Let's go talk to this guy.
Yeah, and it's amazing how we can use those things to our advantage, even if it's being held together by bubble gum and beer cans. It's, if you can make something out of it, use what you got and just go from there. See if it works. See if it's viable, and then if it is, then you could start investing into maybe some other equipment, that kind of thing. But that's so funny that you did that with a cassette recorder. That's just wow.
Yeah. It was, I don't know why I didn't go directly into a computer, but I think at the time, maybe I didn't have the right connector or something. And I'm like, I've got this old cassette deck. And I was like, all right, you do it with what you got. But I mean, when I started 2024, I went through a divorce and a bankruptcy. So that was a banner year for me. And my brother had said, hey, come live with me. You're going to have all these legal bills. And I'm like, nah, I'm just going to get an apartment. I'm 20 something. And he's, no, let your big brother help. Come live in my basement. I was like, all right. So I started the School of Podcasting bankrupt, living in my brother's basement with a flush pipe behind me, hoping nobody would flush the toilet while I recorded, sitting right next to a hot water heater. So it wasn't glamorous at all. But, from one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. So it's enjoy the ride.
That reminds me, when I first started, I was in a different room, but where I had my stuff set up, if the neighbor above me decided to take a shower right in the middle of my episode, you hear the water running behind you. That's funny. Oh, man. So I'd like to know, what do you think holds a lot of entrepreneurs back from getting started? I mean, a lot of us have different emotions and feelings, but in your experience, what do you think stops entrepreneurs from getting across the start line?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the imposter syndrome, or I had a guy at the School of Podcasting, and he was a pilot. Like, he flew in the Air Force and flew in war zones. Like, he was in Afghanistan. I'm like, okay, he's got courage. He had written a book, so he's got content, and he was a keynote speaker. And I'm like, okay, he can talk. So like, and I asked him, I said, what's the deal? And we would have these discussions, and I was like, oh man, that was episode 1. Why didn't you record that? And so I asked him, I go, let's put down let's just put all the cards on the table. What's holding you up here? And he said, I think it's my military background. He goes, I'm afraid to look stupid. I said, brilliant. Okay. I said, we all suffer from that. I go, tell you what, go record episode 1 and send it to me. I go, do you trust me? And he's, yeah. And I go, okay, I'm not going to let you sound stupid. So he sends it to me, and I go, you know what? This is a great story. I go, but great content is the content and the delivery. And I go, it is very obvious that you are reading this. And I go, nobody wants to be read to unless it's the news. I said, it's not, again, story's great. I go, and you don't have to be obnoxious radio guy. Hey, everybody, you don't have to. I said, but add a little voice inflection. And I said, and when we talk, we have to pause a little bit every now and then to figure out what we're going to say. I said, so give it another shot. So comes back, gives me the second version. I go, this is perfect. I go, it's only because I'm listening to see if you're reading that I can tell that you're reading. And I go, and I can tell a little bit. I said, but the average person is never going to know. And he's, nope, hold on. So next day we get back on Zoom, he sends it to me. And I go, I cannot tell you're reading this. He goes, because I'm not. He goes, I know the story now. And I'm like, okay. I said, you don't sound stupid. I said, this is a great story. And I said, I would go ahead and release this. It's good to go. So he did. And I don't know if he kept that as his workflow, because we all have different workflows. But it ended up, he had a business that you could send him a picture of your plane, and he would make this big thing that's stuck on the wall back when you used to be able to stick like Michael Jordan to the wall. He had these things, you just send him a picture, and that was his business, and that took off. But the real benefit of that, I think for him, was talking to other pilots. And you get those Army people and Air Force, and they all got their own little jargon about the KM-27 and the blah, blah, blah. And you're like, I have no idea what they're talking about. And he said a lot of these guys didn't get a chance to really talk about some of their stuff. And he goes, it was almost therapeutic. And he's so I'm almost getting more benefit from that than I am from the business. He goes, the business is doing great. He's, but I just love hanging with the guys again. And they all have their names. His name was Sluggo. I remember that. And so, but the thing that was stopping him wasn't the tech. It wasn't the expense. It was all his head. And I'm just like, look, I said, the only way you're going to sound stupid is if you let yourself sound stupid. And I go, and you need someone to probably listen to it and give you some honest advice. I said, so don't ask mom, because mom will say things like, oh, look at you. Oh, look at all the lights in the camera. You're so professional. And I go, notice mom is not talking about the content. She's talking about your equipment. I said, so you need someone to be able to say, I always jokingly say, hey, you got spinach in your teeth, because nobody likes to walk around like that. You're like, why didn't somebody tell me? And so you have to be open for the fact that, hey, maybe you got spinach in your teeth. And then also you got to find somebody to tell you, because there's a lot of stuff people do that are amazing. It just, at the end, don't have 17 calls to action because people are lost after the first one. So, but that's probably it. It's the brain. It's what between our ears that really, I know people that have had microphones in a drawer for 3 years, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to get to it. And I'm like, come on, let's hammer this out. But that's probably it. The head trash, my one friend calls it. Why would anyone listen to me? And again, it goes back to what we talked about before. We devalue our knowledge because we think everybody knows this stuff, and they don't, because you've been, whatever your jam is, you've been doing it for a while. And it's, if you are a person in your 50s that hasn't played video games in a while, and then sit down with your nephew or niece, and they're like, oh no, it's just up, down, left, right. They know it. And you're like, how do you know all this stuff? That's because they play video games 24/7. And so you've had your life experience of whatever it is, and you are in front of other people who are just getting in, and they'd love to hear it.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. We're definitely going to clip that out, y'all. That's awesome, Dave. You made me flash back a little bit, because my youngest son actually plays semi-professional esports.
Yeah.
And I handed him his first controller, but it was like an N64, and now he's so it's amazing. And now he's, come on, Dad, play this game. This thing has 9 buttons to it. What the heck am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's amazing. You might have come across this, so I don't mean to be going over this like a couple times, but
no.
I'm sure you've been on a few podcasts, heard a lot of podcasts, and you always hear, what's your hardest pitfall? What was the hardest thing you came across, and that kind of thing. I like to turn that around a little bit, and I like to know, what was the hardest pitfall that you're actually proud of? The pitfall that happened, and I'm so glad I had that pitfall, because this positive thing came out of that. Do you have anything like that happened to you?
Man, probably there's 2. The one was at the very beginning, where was, now you've got WordPress, you've got Thinkific and Teachable and all these things to make membership sites. And this is where you would buy a host, and they ran Unix. I remember that. And you would have to upload this server thing. And I had no idea what I was doing. Everything was just follow the directions, ask tech support, follow the directions. And eventually it's, hey, it works. And then you got to integrate PayPal. And it was just, it's one of those things you pay for things in one of 2 currencies, time or money. And back then I had much more time than I had money. So I was just slugging through and figuring it out, and finding out that you just spent the entire night trying to do something and it didn't work because you had 2 commas instead of 1. And you're like, oh, you got to be kidding me. But, you never forget that lesson. So that was one, starting up in the early days when the tools just weren't there, and you had to make them I wasn't hand coding it, but it was like, here's a thing, upload it, install it on your server, put in this thing, and FTPing everything into the background. So that was one. I was like, when it finally worked, I was like, holy cow, I built that. So that was one. And this one sounds like a humble brag, and I don't mean it to, but it really messed with my head. But in 2018, I was inducted into the Podcaster Hall of Fame. So I'm back from Philadelphia. it's time for my first episode after that. And it took me like 4 days to go. I'd start and I'd say something and I'd be like, and today we're going to talk about blah, blah, blah. And I go, oh, this isn't Hall of Fame worthy. No, hold on. It was this whole thing. And I just, it has to be this amazing, earth shattering stuff. And I finally just was like, okay, I'm in my head. I realized, I'm like, this is in my head. I go, so if I was me, how would I coach me? And I'd be like, okay, how did you get in the Hall of Fame? Pretty much I'm just myself, and I try to help people and make things that are hard to understand, try to explain them in a way that it's easy to understand. I'm like, okay, do that. And it was really just a matter of just being myself. I was getting somehow like confused with a persona. Dave Jackson, Hall of Fame podcaster. I'm like, that's the same guy. It's me. It's humbling, and but it really, for a while, I was like, I still, when people go, you're in the Hall of Fame, I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I get it. I guess I helped enough people. It's just one of those things where, and that goes back to my background. I grew up in the church, and the last will be first, and to be humble and serve others. And so when somebody comes along and serves you a big giant compliment, I remember when I was married, my ex-wife, we went to a podcast event, and these people would come up and, oh man, your show has helped me so much. I love it. It's so entertaining. You're so funny. And I remember if they said something like, oh, you're so funny, I would always make a joke out of it and go, looks aren't everything. And at one point she just looked at me and she goes, the person walked away and she goes, you are absolutely horrible accepting compliments. And I go, she's just shut up and say thank you. She goes, because when you say, oh, it's no big deal, she goes, you're negating the compliment. Like they're giving you a gift and you're like, yeah, I don't want it. And I was like, okay. So that was something else I had to learn. And I always appreciate it. But yeah, that was one. It took me a while to kind of like, okay, just go back to being yourself. And that's what got me here. Stay with the one that brought you. So it took me a bit to get over it. And it's a lot of my friends joke about it, though. I was at an event and somebody said, oh, Dave Jackson's here. And the MC was a friend of mine. He goes, no, man, that is the Dave Jackson. And I go, I don't know what that means. And ever since then, it's, how the easiest way to get a nickname is to say you don't like it. So there are certain people that are like, oh, there's the Dave Jackson. I'm like, okay, are we enough? Are we done with that gag? Come on now, let's move on. So yeah.
What's funny is when I first got started, I had a real problem with deflection as well, too. That's what that is. That's deflection. Yeah. And you're right. It doesn't negate the compliment, and it's just, oh yeah, whatever, go away. That's what it really sounds like to them if you just say or make a joke out of it or whatever. I learned how to not deflect in a couple of chapters in the book called The Big Leap. And it told me about deflection and how to accept a compliment and kind of take it into yourself as somebody actually giving you a compliment instead of saying, yeah, I'm not that big. You could just say, thank you, I really appreciate those words, and then actually take it into yourself. It really did make a difference in somebody's life. Yeah. And it helps bring more abundance to yourself too, because you have that positive feeling that you've accepted for yourself too. So I've learned a lot less about being deflecting like that.
Yeah, I remember once I was at an event and they were doing a book signing. So I brought my books, and this woman walks by and sees my name at the bottom of the book. And she goes, are you Dave Jackson? And I go, yeah. And she goes, oh man, your show has helped me so much. And I go, and I'm like, oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And she said, no, you don't get it. Like, you're like, this has been the thing. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I'm so glad I could help. Thank you so much. And she's, no, like she smacks her hand on my book. So, you don't get it. And I finally just said, that really touches my heart. I go, I'm so glad I could help you. I love to help people. And that apparently was enough, but it was this, I never will forget that. There were 3 times, and the second time she's like, no, you don't get it. And I was like, holy cow. But yeah, that was great practice. And it takes, and that is the thing. That's why I do it. I mean, I remember once I helped a woman who truly needed her car jump started, because if she didn't get to work, she was going to get fired. And she was a neighbor of mine and stopped by. And long story short, I ended up having to give her a ride to work because we couldn't get her car to start. And the whole time she's, you have no idea how much you're helping me. I cannot lose my job. And if I missed a day. And when I left, I swear, like, I don't do drugs, but I felt high. Like I was just buzzing because I had truly helped her. And so that's something that for me, that's people always say, why do you do that? I'm like, I just help people. And so when somebody comes up and says, hey, you helped me, and I go, thank you, it makes me feel great. And I try not to negate it. And that's to your point. I try now. I'm like, oh, look, this is exactly what you're working for. You're looking for someone to say, thank you, you helped me. Don't negate it. Suck it in, because that's why I'm doing this. So yeah, it's an interesting topic, how we kind of trip ourselves up.
Yeah, and I've learned that that's why I'm an entrepreneur. That's why I do the podcast. It's not because I think I'm smarter than anybody else or anything like that. It's I look for the positive reinforcement that I'm actually making a difference somewhere. And living on that, like you called it, a high, it just makes the rest of my day, the rest of my week, a whole different ballgame than it would have been if I didn't get that thank you or anything like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's amazing.
I go ahead.
I was gonna go into a different subject, but I want to hear what you have to say.
I grew up poor. I didn't know I was poor at the time, but all of a sudden everybody else was buying stuff, and we were like, yeah, we can't afford that. And so this is before there were vending machines in schools. And so I would go to the local corner store, buy a couple packs of gum, and then sell it by the slice in the school. And it's like I would sell basically 2 slices for the price of a pack. And it was just this weird markup thing. And it was weird because I felt embarrassed. I'm like, because people are like, hey, can you give me a piece of gum? I'm like, I'll sell you one for 20 cents. But after a while, it was like, hey, that started to add up. And so I've always had this, if I want something, I will find a way to get it. I mean, I was the kid that was 5 years old selling lemonade on the street when they were paving the road and things like that. So it's one of those things I didn't realize it, but I think I've always had that. And then eventually I got a paper route, and I found out that if you do better than other people, you can earn tips doing that. So the previous guy would just throw the paper on the porch. If it's raining, thanks a lot. I would go up and put it in the door and keep it dry. And I was making enough money on a paper route to where I actually ended up buying a car for $300 back in the day. It's a piece of crap, but it ran, and I made enough to pay for insurance, which was a lot when you're 16, and enough to keep it in gas. But I always had that, how can I do one step above what everybody else was doing, something to stand out? And consequently, instead of letting my mom buy my school clothes where she shopped at, I don't know, the Peter Brady collection in Kmart, and I'm like, do I really have to wear that to school? I would go buy my own stuff because I was like, I'm not wearing that. Mom, I'll take you shopping with me. And when we run out of your budget, let me know and I'll use my budget. But that's the other thing is, like right now with podcasters, a lot of people that are only using advertising, well, the price that advertisers are willing to pay is getting lower. The whole CPM, cost per 1,000 downloads. And I'm like, yeah, you don't have a whole lot of control over that. So that's where I always say, have some sort of your own side hustle, some sort of entrepreneur thing going on, because the most profitable thing is to sell your own product. I mean, if I sell a book, I think I make $12 on a book sale. That's if I buy it from my publisher. So if I'm making $5 CPM, that's 2,400 downloads. So what's easier to do, get 2,400 downloads or sell one book? Mm-hmm. So when you sell your own stuff and your own services, it's so much more profitable.
Yeah, and you really get into a point where you're thinking to yourself, there's 2 ways to really think about it. And I read that I just finished reading for the 8th time Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he makes a point there where instead of thinking about, I can't afford it, think about, how can I afford it? Change that kind of that mindset and that thinking to where you could actually work for something to get what you want instead of saying to yourself, I can't afford it, so I'm not going to even try. So
yeah. And my dad was a drill sergeant in the Air Force. So he was a no nonsense kind of guy. And where other kids were like, hey, Dad, can I have $20? He'd be like, okay, wash the car, mow the lawn. And I did not get money for nothing. He was like, if you want money, you got to work for it. So that's something else, as much as some people might go, oh, how horrible. I'm like, no, I appreciate it. He put a work ethic in me. So it's just a matter of the drive and just realizing that not everything's going to work. And when things don't work, okay, that's not a failure. That's a lesson, said the teacher. So you just keep moving on.
Yeah, exactly. Great stuff, David. I appreciate that. So what I'd like to know here is, I'm sure you come across new entrepreneurs every once in a while when you're doing things. If you came across a new entrepreneur and says, hey, I'm about to start in this entrepreneurial adventure, what kind of advice would you give them? What kind of steps would you have them take when they were first getting started?
Yeah, first of all, if the goal is I want to make money, great. What problem are you solving? Because and it's not that if I work with a podcaster and it's a movie review show, right? Okay, you're solving a problem by helping people not watch bad movies, but it's not quite as obvious as something where, oh, I want to do blank and I don't know how, and you're going to teach me the how to. You're still solving a problem. It's just not as obvious. So the more obvious the problem you're solving, the easier it is to get people to open up their wallet. I mean, if you look at the movie industry right now, right now I have a pass to go see movies. It's as many as I want for $20. And I'm not making this up. I have not been in a theater yet that's had more than 7 people in it. It's amazing. And I'm like, wow, because if they wait 10 days, it'll be on some sort of streaming platform.
Mhm.
So why pay $20 and $15 for popcorn? So, but for the brand new person, yeah. And what am I solving? And then look at your competition, like I said at the beginning, because you want to see not to steal, right? You can be inspired, but don't steal. And also don't let it scare you because, again, there are 17 varieties of news channels, and some people are just going to relate to you. Some of them won't, but that's okay. But some people will like, oh, I want to learn from a middle-aged white dude, so they come and see me. But if you want to learn from a female, then you go see Courtney over at Pod Lunch or whoever. And you got to be okay that not everybody's going to like you. You can't get them all. But, and then just, it's funny because we have these big hurdles. And like right now, I'm doing some things and I will spend maybe an hour and a half a day on my business. Now that's moving it along at much slower than I want, but it's moving it along. Whereas if you go, oh, I would do something. Oh, I've only got an hour and a half. So I don't know. I guess I'll just watch Netflix or play video games or whatever. And it's no, pennies make dollars. And so keep moving it along and you'll be amazed. And I've always found a lot of times too, if you're dreading something, like I never think, oh, I can't wait to get on a treadmill, right? That's usually not my thought, but I never dread getting off. Like when I get off, I'm like, all right, good job, Dave. That was 45 minutes and you did this and that. So there are a lot of things we think are harder than they are. I just did my taxes. I filed for an extension and I really hated my taxes and I use H&R Block and I got done and I was like, why was I even worried about this? Like it was just answer the stupid question. And they even tell you it's on line 24 or this and that. And it's just data entry. And you look up and you're like, okay, I can afford that. But we dread doing those things. And a lot of times we don't like doing something because we don't know what we're doing. It's new. And that's a good thing because the more we learn, the more valuable we are. I remember the first time I saw ChatGPT and the first thing I said was, ooh, I don't like this. I'm like, this could replace me and this and that. And then I showed it to my older brother and he said, what voodoo are you playing with now? And just the reactions I saw, I was like, oh, and again, the gray hair, I remember teaching people how to send email. And I remember that you would pair them up and this kid sent an email to his buddy sitting right next to him. He's like, dude, he just hit send and like, it's already here. And he just, how did he do that? Because back then mail was actual mail. Like it was physical. And the fact that it was here in seconds, he was like, what is this voodoo? And so I was like, you know what? It's time to get up on AI. And there are times when I go, I don't know what I'm doing. What's the best? So then you ask AI, how's the best way to prompt you? And it goes, oh, do this, do that. And then you watch a couple YouTube videos and the next thing you're in that boat again where, hey, I know I have a friend of mine. He's like, when did you become such an AI guru? I go, dude, I could barely spell AI, let alone be a guru. And he's like, I've never even played with it. So just keep moving, especially if you're in, like me, I'm in kind of a technology field. And if you don't keep moving, you're not only stopped, you've gone backwards because it's going to keep on rolling. So yeah, so figure out what you want to do. And then realize that it doesn't always work. Sometimes you have a digital resume that's way overpriced and not very good compared to your competitors. And you go, oh, all right. I started one show called the Customer Service Show because that was one of my backgrounds. And I think I made it 8 episodes until it dawned on me, oh, you know what? This is my job. It's not my passion.
Mhm.
It's this, and I was like, yeah. So, and I just sounded like a grumpy old man. I was like, I went into a store today and nobody. Meh, meh, meh. I was like, okay, this isn't helping anybody. So,
Yeah, it's important to know what your passion is so you know what you could talk about, and that passion will definitely rub off on anybody else that happens to be listening that might have that same passion, that might have questions about it, or just want to find out, hey, I need more information about AI. I need more information about this. And they'll find you. They'll find you that way because they're looking for that
yeah,
thing in particular. So it's really important to have that passion. Finding your zone of genius to know where your passion lies. It's very, very important. That's one of the first things I really talk about. If
yeah.
somebody asks
And
me about their podcast, what's your zone of genius? What's a zone of genius? Let me explain it to you. And then so on and so on.
yeah,
So yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome.
and, and be careful looking at your competition because that can really pop your bubble. Because
Oh
then
yeah.
you turn into, how come they're so popular? Meh, meh. And like, no, focus on your audience. That's what you need to focus on. Don't focus on them because that'll just pop your bubble. I've seen people, it's weird because you're like, holy cow, I've got 30 downloads an episode for my show. I'm like, great. And then somebody will pop into a Facebook group. Hey, we just went over 1 million. And they're like, oh, how come there's so much? And I'm like, no. Comparison is the thief of joy. Don't do that. And just keep moving.
Yeah, compare yourself to
And just
yourself.
realize the other thing is, yeah, yeah. And one last thing that I just had and forgot. Oh, nobody wants to hear this answer, but I hear it all the time. Everybody thinks I'm going to start a thing and I'm going to do this and then I'm going to make money. And I'd love to hear your comment on this. But when I interviewed people for my book about podcast monetization, in fact, I just heard a show today and they were talking about YouTube and they were talking about monetization. And the phrase that comes up is not 3 days, not 3 months, not 3 weeks. It's 3 years because you don't monetize a podcast. You monetize an audience. And whether that's on YouTube, on a newsletter, on a podcast, whatever it is, you've got to get people listening to you. And if that just unfortunately takes years, at least in my travels. I don't know. Is that what you find?
Yeah, I've been doing this for 3 years. I'm still trying to get traction. I'm giving myself 5 years, actually, not
Yeah.
just three, to see where this goes. But my main concern isn't so much as how much money I can make at the podcast. It's how many people can I help with the information that I have on my podcast. That's what I think about more than anything else. And then if somebody wants to pay me for something after that, great. It's a bonus. It's not what I'm trying to get to. It's the bonus that counts for. My payment is helping other people, and I've been like that for since I was born. I was that little kid, that 5-year-old kid that would hold open the door for a little old lady that needed to walk through the door, helping a Boy Scout, helping them cross the street. I've been
Yeah.
that way my whole life. So instead of thinking, how much money can I make off of this episode? No, how many people can I help with this episode? That's my first thing. And then the money eventually follows that. So, but it does take time.
Yeah.
It does take time.
Yeah.
And if you're not mentally ready for it to take that amount of time, you need to think a little further about what you're about to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's my 2 cents on that. Speaking of money. Okay. So what I like to do here, and this is for tradition on my podcast, I'd like to know the next 6 months. Do you have a goal for yourself and your entrepreneur adventure in the next 6 months?
Yeah, I do. I am right now really focused on building my newsletter. I hired a coach for the first time in years. That is, again, sometimes you need somebody to go, you're doing what? And so I've done that. I got held up a lot in the technology because sometimes you're like, ooh, look, that one's shiny. And it's, ooh. And so I put a lot of that behind me. I did move some technology to another. And so, but that's one of the things, anytime you say, I'm going to do this new thing, you need to put on the calendar the time to learn the new thing because it makes no sense to get the new newsletter tool or the new this tool or that tool or the new AI tool if you don't take time to use it. Like a weed whacker is only good as the person that knows how to pull the trigger and aim. So you have to do that. So my goal is to grow the newsletter, always looking to grow more people at the School of Podcasting. And at Podpage, we're looking to always grow more people. We're working right now on that elm. We're really reaching out to our community and going, what do you need? What would work better for you? Because we've added some features and we've added some other things, but we're really leaning into the community because we're finding out we have brilliant people in the community. And we're like, oh, we should just lean on this person for that or lean on that person. So that's something we're doing at Podpage. And I guess every business wants more customers, but for me, I want more customers, but I never look at customers as numbers. They're people. And I love the fact that when somebody goes, oh, I'm thinking of doing this kind of show, and I can go, oh, I know the person I need to introduce you to. And so having this bigger Rolodex of people I can reach out to, because I really have found that's a lot of it is like who you know, but who knows you. If I go back to, we can reopen the door of Humble Brag Theater, and I'm sorry, but this is what happened. This is before I worked at Libsyn, and before there was a Podfest or a podcast movement, there was this thing called the New Media Expo, and the guy that ran the podcasting track had left, and they needed a new podcast guy. So the guy that ran the New Media Expo called Spreaker, he called Blue Bear, and he called Libsyn and said, who do you think we should get to fill this podcast space and really run that whole section? And they all said Dave Jackson. Why? Because I'd had them all on my show, and they all listened to my show. Because again, back then there were like 50 podcasts, but they had heard my show. I'd had them on the show. So that starts to build a relationship. And that then led to this, which led to that, which led to this. One of my favorite things was I had been asked to speak at Podfest. So I'm at Podfest, and Mike from the Membership Guys podcast, who I knew, I'm talking to him, and Pat Flynn walks up. I knew Pat Flynn because I hired Pat Flynn to speak at New Media Expo when he did the thing with the DeLorean. That was my year. And so I'm talking to Pat because Pat knew Mike and he knew me. And then Michael Stelzner walked up because he wanted to talk to Pat. And so I knew Mike Stelzner a little bit. He's the guy behind Social Media Marketing World. And without really trying, we got to talk about podcasting, and Mike Stelzner got to see how much I knew about podcasting. And the next thing I know, I get home from Podfest, and there's an email from Michael Stelzner going, hey, would you want to speak at Social Media Marketing World? So it's just these things where this led to this, which led to that. I always say a podcast, it leads to relationships with your audience, and those relationships lead to opportunities, and those opportunities lead to more relationships, and those relationships lead to more opportunities. So it's just this cycle that just starts rolling. It just takes a while for it to get going.
Yeah, and it's amazing how that works too. That's actually been happening to me a lot lately over the last, even since I saw you at Podfest this last year. I actually had JLD and Pat Flynn on my podcast recently.
Yeah.
And I think it's since I was able to meet JLD, he was a keynote speaker at the last Podfest we were at. Yeah. I shook his hand, talked to him, asked him to be on my podcast. And then after that, Pat ended up on my podcast. And now you're on my podcast. And I'm hoping like the word will get around about who the heck I am. And just like you're saying, maybe Skoob will end up somewhere else saying, oh yeah, talk to this guy. And that's really what it's all about. And it didn't cost me anything. It just cost me being able to shake somebody's hand and say, hey, it's so great to meet you. Thank you for what you did. And it all comes back down to that.
Well, and you are a guy that definitely likes to help people. When I was at Podfest, I was the only person running the Podpage booth, and we got slammed. Oh, and I'm talking to one person, and Scoobs just steps up. She's like, oh, let me tell you about Podpage. I love it. It's great. Blah, blah, starts answering questions. I was like, okay, I've never met this guy, but I love him because he's helping me out. It was great. I loved it.
I completely forgot about that. Yeah. Oh, okay. Thanks. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, it was definitely experience. I love it. Just real quick, I know we've mentioned Podpage a couple of times. I know this is out of my regular ordinary, but could you do me a favor and just? I know a lot of people are wanting to start podcasts and things like that, and they're looking for somewhere that's very simple, that very easy and inexpensive to put a website. Can you just give us just a quick 2-minute rundown of what Podpage actually is?
Yeah, Podpage is made for people that want a pretty website, but they don't want to learn how to code. And basically, we take your information from whoever you're hosting with, whether it's Spotify or Buzzsprout or Captivate or Libsyn or Blueberry, whoever. We pull in all that information in the same way that Apple Podcasts pulls in all that information, and they line it up so you can click play and you see the pictures and stuff. We do the same thing. We just mold it into a website. And then we don't want to be MailChimp. We don't want to be Constant Contact, but we integrate with those things. We don't want to be YouTube, so we integrate with YouTube so we can pull in your videos. And then Brendan, the guy behind Podpage, Brendan Mulligan, he built Podpage the same way I recommend you build a podcast. And that is go to your audience and go, what do you need this to do? So he hired me back in 2020 and said, hey, I got this idea for this thing. And I go, we're going to need an about page, a contact page, and a way to get our episodes in. And he came back in a week and said, like this? And I go, dude, that's amazing. I go, any way you could integrate that with Patreon and PayPal? And he came back in a week and said, like this? And I go, ooh, okay. Well, and over the years, he's added things like a guest intake form. So you send a form to people, they fill it out, and then later you click a button and add it to the episode. So it's just an amazing tool that it's funny because when he hired me, he goes, you know what's really going to suck about this? And I go, what? He goes, you're one of our biggest supporters. So for like 4 years before I started working there, I've been telling people, this is like the easiest way to make a website. It's so amazing. And he goes, and now nobody's going to believe you because you work for Podpage. And I go, well, I'll just tell him, go and listen to the old episodes. I've been promoting this thing since 2020. So yeah, it's a great tool. And you can start your, let me put on my crappy radio voice, start your 14-day free trial by going to podpage.com/preview. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to make sure I got that in there. If you go into the show notes, y'all, I do have an affiliate link for you guys. I'm going to have that in there. Same thing, 14-day free trial. Yeah, so that's great. So what I'd like to do, since we got off, I'm going to get back on track here.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do with you, Dave, if it's okay with you, is I'd like to follow up with you in 6 months and see if you've reached those goals that we talked about a little bit earlier and see what your experience was putting those goals together and that kind of thing. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Whew, boy, this has been amazing. Okay, so what I'd like to do here is give you, this is your time to shine, Dave. This is the time where I want you to actually advertise yourself. How do we get a hold of you? Where do we find your podcast and all that good stuff? Okay, ready, set, go.
Yeah. So the website, schoolofpodcasting.com, where you have step-by-step courses to get you from idea to world domination, basically, as well as, and this is the part people go, what do you mean when you say unlimited? I mean unlimited coaching. So if you look at my schedule and Wednesday's open and you go, I could do that then you take it. And people go, well, what if I wanted Wednesday and Thursday? And I go, if it's available, then take it. It's unlimited coaching. I do a lot of coaching via an app. I have somebody right now that lives in Thailand and she's, I love you, Dave, but I'm not getting up at 4 a.m. to do a Zoom call. So we do a lot of things asynchronously via app where we can send text messages and audio and video. So there's unlimited coaching. So if you're a person's, I feel so alone when I'm trying to do this stuff, you're not. I'm literally right there with you. I answered somebody's question tonight at Chipotle, and they thought that was hilarious that I'm sitting in the middle of a Chipotle answering your question. And then you've got this community of people from marriage counselors, accountants, retired pastors, dog groomers, prepping people. I'm trying to think of everybody, AI specialists, video specialists. It's an amazing community. And we meet once a week every Friday. Then we meet once on the weekends because some people are in different time zones. And then once on a Wednesday night to catch the West Coast. So between the courses, the coaching, and the community, come check me out at schoolofpodcasting.com.
All right. All right, Dave, this has been probably one of the most fun episodes I've ever did. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be an Undiscovered Entrepreneur, get across the start line. I had a complete blast.
Scoobs, thanks for having me, man. This was fun.
All right. All right, Skooblievers, make sure you stay tuned for the wrap-up. Okay, everybody, thank you. Bye-bye. All right, Skooblievers, that was Dave. Dave was amazing. I loved talking to him. He had so much great information. I loved hearing his story from where he started as a podcaster and getting the most amazing guests on his podcast just by starting from the very beginning. But as usual, I do have a couple of takeaways from this episode. Now, Dave's School of Podcasting and Podpage's success shows that startups in 2025 thrive by addressing niche problems with authentic experiences. Start with what you have, like Dave did in his brother's basement, and focus on helping one person at a time build momentum. We change the world one person at a time, and it just grows from there. If we could change one person's world, that person will change somebody else's world, and so on and so on. There's always going to be somebody that is just a little bit behind you that wants to know how you did whatever the heck it is that you did. Now, Dave's podcasting journey went from flops to Hall of Fame. That proves that relationships and learning from setbacks can drive your success. So even though we do have setbacks every once in a while, we want to cherish those setbacks because we know that's the gateway to our future. With that, I want to say thank you, Skooblievers, for another great episode. If you heard something you think that might benefit a friend of yours or a coworker or anything like that, please send this episode to them. They might need it. All right, Skooblievers, thank you very much. Bye-bye.